aside from maybe stone soup. So did everyone get a chance to greet your neighbor? Did you get to greet your neighbor this morning? Yeah? Did you have fun saying hello to your neighbor? Yeah? So I have a question for you. I'm wondering, how did you know who your neighbor was? How did you know? Oh, you're sitting next to each other. What else? They were here. Right? By virtue of being in the building, I have to give Stephanie a high five because she's my neighbor this morning. So keep that in mind. Who is your neighbor? How do you know that someone is your neighbor? We talked last week about this idea of being progressive Christians. And we said that the main business of a progressive Christian is not the church, not the building, not the financials, not the behinds in the pews on Sunday morning. That the business of the progressive Christian, the business of a spiritual community such as Unity Fort Wayne Spiritual Center, the business is love and compassion. Love and compassion like Jesus taught us in his life and in his ministry. And at the core of that is the question, who is my neighbor? And so I invite you to really think about that this morning and really feel that in your bones. But before we can decide who our neighbor is, we probably need to remember who we are. Who are we? According to Unity's principles, the first principle is God is. There is one power and one presence in the universe and in my life, known by many names, including G-O-D. That's the first principle. The second principle is I am. We are. We are created in the image of God. We are of the same essence as God is. If you went to ancestryandme.com, it would say 99.9% God. 1% everything else. Right? We are of the essence of God. And so what does that mean in relationship to who is my neighbor? What does that mean in my relationships to other people and to God? And so I want you to consider two questions that kind of help answer that. And it comes from the Catechism in the Catholic Book of Common Prayers. So how many Reformed Catholics do I have in the room? Don't be bashful. All right, so right now I want you to take a deep breath. And as you exhale, let go of all of that stuff you have with the Catholic Church. And I'm going to invite you to just breathe into these questions as a progressive Christian. To breathe into these questions through the lens of Unity teachings. First question. What does it mean to be created in the image of God? Answer. It means that we are free to make choices. To love, to create, to reason. To reason is about using our mind, changing our mind, choosing our thoughts. Very new thoughts, don't you think? And to live in harmony with creation and with God. To live in harmony with creation and God. Remember last week we described a progressive Christian as moving forward. Opening our minds to new ideas. opening our hearts to ways to love and to have compassion, being willing to move towards creating harmony. Second question. So why then do we live apart from God and out of harmony with creation? If this is who we are, why? Why? Why are there wars? Why is there prejudice? Why is there racism? Why is there fighting and hunger? Why? Answer. From the beginning, human beings have misused their freedom and made wrong choices. Now, I doubt that there is anyone in this room who could say they've never made a wrong choice. If so, we can trade places. Right? I would venture to say that we have all made choices that have hurt ourselves. That we've all made choices that have hurt other people, that have actually brought harm to a situation. But how many of you know that you have misused your freedom to choose? So just breathe into that. As I was thinking about love and compassion and being a progressive Christian, I was inspired to tell the story of stone soup that I told the children this morning. Now, you know, in our adult eyes, we can hear that story and think, man, that guy was quite a shyster. He went into town with nothing and walked out with some really good soup, right? But the core of that story is much different. So think about those villagers. A stranger comes into town, they close their doors, and they say, I don't have enough. I don't have anything to give you. I've got nothing to share. I barely have enough to feed my own family. Unity minister and teacher Eric Butterworth would call that onlyness consciousness. I only have enough. I only have enough time for. I am only responsible for. I am only. When we live in onlyness consciousness, we are misusing our freedom. We are misusing our freedom by choosing to live in onlyness. That's also known as a myopic view. And most of us have blinders on. We are concerned about our family. We are concerned about our finances. We are concerned about our homes, with no awareness or consciousness of our neighbors. Just like the people in the village. If you're having some rubs, some feeling uncomfortable about this thought that you've misused your freedom, take a breath with me. And I want you to think about the last 24 hours. Just the last 24 hours. A progressive Christian favors the individual over the institution. In the last 24 hours, when did you put someone else before your agenda? When did you give up doing it your way for someone else's? In the last 24 hours. When, in the last 24 hours, were you humble? Remember, progressive Christians favor humility over hubris. When did you put someone else's needs, desires, wants before yours? in just the last 24 hours. And lastly, in the last 24 hours, when did you choose justice over judgment? When did you choose to do the right thing in the midst of all the judgments that were running in your head? That's the misuse of our freedom. And we all do it. And the good news is we can choose differently. We can choose again. Every day is a new opportunity to choose with consciousness. I think that the stranger was not slick. I think that the stranger was a progressive Christian because he was humble. Humble enough to say, it's all right. I'm not taking anything from you. I have everything I need. That's progressive faith. Knowing that the universe has your back. That you have everything that you need. And he put his little pot down and he filled it up with water and he dropped the stone in. And then he invited community to take place. He did the right thing in spite of judgment. He used justice. He didn't go away mad. He didn't take that stone and throw it through somebody's window. He didn't shake the dirt off his feet. Here's an opportunity for me to show love and compassion. And in that story, what he teaches us is that when we learn to live open-hearted, we create community. That when we give up our onlyness for a progressive faith that knows that we are all connected, that knows that we are all of the same image, that knows that there's always enough in this universe, then what we create is harmony. In the story, who is the neighbor? Who's the neighbor? What do you think? Was it the man? Was it the villagers? Was it only the people that contributed? Who was the neighbor?
Everybody.
Everybody? There's another story that also talks about who is your neighbor. We find it in Luke chapter 10. There are a group of followers at Jesus' feet, and he's teaching them, and one young man decides to challenge him. Actually, I don't know whether he was young or not. A lawyer. It does say he was a lawyer. Challenges him and says, how do I get into heaven? Like, just give me the short version. What do I got to do? What do I got to do to live forever and to get there? And Jesus asks him, what does the law say? What does the law tell you about heaven? And this is how the man answers him. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live. That wasn't good enough for the man, right? He wanted black and white instructions, the kind that my wife likes to follow, and I ignore. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus then tells him the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, some of you may know that story. Some of us grew up hearing that story from little bitty on. So today you get to hear it with new ears, because you get to hear Rev. Glenda's 2018 version of the Good Samaritan story. So there was a person that was traveling on business in Chicago. And it became late at night, And they took a wrong turn, and they ended up in a neighborhood that they were unfamiliar with. And just about that time, a group of young thugs ran their car off the road, drug them out of the car, beat them, stole the car, and left. And the person was on the side of the road, bloody and bruised, without a cell phone, didn't know what was going to happen. And just about that time, a holy person caught a glimpse of what was going on. They were on their way back from a fundraiser from the Association of Churches. And they thought to themselves, that's probably some homeless dude over there. They're probably drunk or mentally ill, or they got some kind of stuff. I should pray for them. Yes. I will pray for them, and when I go to church tomorrow morning, I will have my congregation pray for their salvation. Yep, that's what I'm going to do. And he took another street. Just a short while later, a lawyer also comes upon the scene, and the lawyer says, oh, this could be tricky. Like, this could really be a mess. You see, the lawyer was coming back from a cocktail party with clients and wasn't too sure what the BAC level was. Blood alcohol. It would look really bad if I got a ticket. Like, that wouldn't be helpful. And really, as a law-abiding citizen, I should let the authorities take care of that problem. Like, this is being a lawyer, he knew how sticky it was. Like, I should really, I'm just going to drive on by. Our poor stranger is feeling hopeless, not sure if they're going to live or die. And they've just about given up when who should pull up next to them? A Trump supporter. Or it could be an illegal immigrant. Or it could be a Muslim. It could be anybody that you identify as the other. And you know the other I'm talking about. Right? Could be a right-wing Christian. Whoever your other is. Pulls up and immediately jumps out of their vehicle, grabs their cell phone, calls 911, gets the EMTs there, gives first aid to the individual, and even tells the EMTs, I'm this person's brother. So I have to come in the ambulance with them to make sure that they are well cared for. At this point in the story, Jesus asks a very important question. Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And the man answered, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. So you see, as progressive Christians, the question is never, who is our neighbor? The question is, how are we a neighbor? Because you see, if we are all created in the image of God, then what Pat said is correct. Everyone is our neighbor. How do you show mercy? How do you show mercy? Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines mercy as a blessing that is an act of divine favor or compassion. How are you a blessing in the world? How are you a blessing to the stranger? How are you a blessing to the other? How are you a blessing to your neighbor? How do you demonstrate compassion in your life? Compassion is not to be confused with feeling sorry for, not to be confused with having empathy for. You see, I can identify with you. That's not going to change your situation. I can feel sorry for you. It's not going to make your life any easier. A progressive Christian is about forward just action, compassion, a consciousness of the other's distress together with a desire to alleviate it. Much different than empathy or sympathy. Compassion is about identifying, seeing the suffering, and then being moved to do something about it. As a progressive Christian, how are you going to use your freedom? Your freedom to choose love, your freedom to create, your freedom to live in harmony. How are you going to use your freedom to be merciful? How are you going to live as love and compassion in the world? How are you going to shine your light as love and compassion? How progressive are you willing to be with infinite love and gratitude?